Hello. My name is Grace Carter, and today, I want to share with you a story that could change the way you see life, death, and what lies beyond. Have you ever wondered what happens after death? What if, just for a moment, you could cross over to the other side and return with knowledge that would change the course of your life forever? Today, I want to share with you an experience that challenges everything we think we know about life, death, and our divine purpose. This is not just a story of survival, it is a testimony of revelation. Have you ever wondered what happens after we take our last breath? Is there something beyond the veil of this world? What if, for just a brief moment, someone could cross that boundary, witness the truth, and return to share it with the world? This is my story, a moment that changed everything. The day everything changed. March 3, 2024, was supposed to be just another day. The morning sun painted the sky in soft hues of gold as I left my home, unaware that I was about to step into an event that would forever alter the course of my life. I had plans, responsibilities, and dreams like anyone else. But in the blink of an eye, everything was ripped away. As I drove down the highway, a truck swerved into my lane at full speed. There was no time to react, no time to think. The impact was catastrophic. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. My world turned black. To those around me, it seemed like the end. My pulse faded, my breath ceased, and the world declared me gone. Clinically, I was dead. But that was not the end of my story, it was just the beginning. Crossing over. I didn't slip into nothingness. Instead, I became aware, more aware than ever before. The pain of the crash was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. I found myself standing in a place beyond time, beyond understanding. It was neither a dream nor a hallucination, it was more real than anything I had ever known. Before me stretched a vast expanse, filled with a light that was not just brightness but pure love. I could feel it moving through me, filling every part of my soul with warmth, understanding, and clarity. Then, I heard a voice, gentle yet powerful, speaking directly to my soul. It is not yet your time, but you must return and share what you have seen. What I saw, what I learned, and the message I was given are not just for me. They are for all of us. A revelation that changes everything. In those moments beyond death, I was shown the truth about life, why we are here, what happens when we die, and the eternal reality that awaits us all. I saw things that defied explanation, things I could never have imagined. I understood the depth of divine love, the purpose of suffering, and the reality of choices that shape our eternity. And then, just as suddenly as I had left, I was pulled back. My body lay lifeless in the wreckage, but in an instant, breath returned to my lungs. Paramedics, who had all but given up, watched in shock as my heart started beating again. Against all odds, I came back, with a message that had the power to transform lives. What did I see? What did I learn? And what does it mean for you? This is my testimony. A moment that changed everything. Grace felt no fear, no hesitation, only an unexplainable peace as she was drawn toward the radiant presence before her. The light wasn't just illumination, it was alive, pulsing with warmth, understanding, and a love so pure it enveloped her completely. She wasn't just seeing the light, she was experiencing it, as if every part of her soul was being bathed in an unearthly embrace. And then, she saw him. Jesus stood before her, not as an image from a painting or a vision shaped by human imagination, but as a living, undeniable presence. His eyes were unlike anything she had ever seen, piercing yet gentle, filled with an eternity of wisdom, yet overflowing with love so intense it made her entire being tremble. He didn't speak at first, but in his gaze, Grace felt as though he had already told her everything. Time seemed to stand still. She wanted to fall to her knees, to weep, to worship, but in this place, she had no body, only pure awareness, pure existence. Then, he spoke. Grace, it is not yet your time. The words were not just heard, they resonated through her very soul. She felt them in every part of her being, as if truth itself was being woven into the fabric of her existence. "But why am I here?" she asked, though the words were not spoken aloud. In this place, thoughts were understood without being voiced. Jesus gazed at her with an expression both sorrowful and full of joy. "Because I have something to show you." The revelation. Suddenly, the light around them shifted, and in an instant, Grace was no longer standing before him. Instead, she found herself seeing, not with her eyes, but with a deeper sense of vision that could perceive beyond the limits of human sight. She saw her life, not as a series of memories, but as a complete, unfiltered reality. Every moment, every decision, every thought and action she had ever taken unfolded before her. But it was not just a recollection. She could feel how each choice had rippled into the lives of others, how her words had lifted some and wounded others. She gasped as she saw the moments she had ignored those in need, the times she had chosen pride over kindness, the silent struggles of people she had never even noticed. And yet, in the same breath, she also saw moments of love, every act of kindness, every time she had lifted someone up, every prayer whispered in faith. Tears, though not physical, welled up inside her. "I never knew," she thought. Jesus' voice was gentle, yet firm. "Every life is woven into eternity, Grace. Every action matters." Then, the vision shifted again. She saw a place, vast, endless, unlike anything on earth. It was not simply a landscape, but a reality beyond reality. She felt an overwhelming sense of love, belonging, and purpose. Souls were there, bathed in light, full of joy, fully alive in a way she had never known was possible. Then, she saw something else. A place where the light did not reach. It was not the fire and brimstone image she had once imagined, but something far worse, a separation, a complete absence of the presence of God. A deep sorrow filled her soul as she realized that this too was real. She turned to Jesus, her heart trembling. "What does this mean?" He looked at her with infinite sorrow and infinite love. "It means the choice is real. And the time to choose is now." The return. Before she could process everything she had seen, she felt something pulling her backward, like a force drawing her away from this divine reality. She wanted to stay, to ask more, to understand more. But she knew, her time was not yet come. The light began to fade. The warmth around her started to disappear. The presence of Jesus remained, but he was now distant, as if watching over her from afar. Then, darkness. Silence. And suddenly, pain. A gasp tore from her lungs as she felt air rush back into her body. A blinding light, not the heavenly one, but the harsh glow of ambulance lights, filled her vision. She heard voices shouting, the sound of sirens wailing. She was back. Paramedics were surrounding her, disbelief in their eyes. "We thought we lost you," one of them whispered, shaking his head. But Grace knew the truth. She had been lost, but now she was found. A message for the world. Days passed, but the experience never faded. It was more than just a vision, it was a calling. She had to share what she had seen, what she had learned. Life was not just about existence, it was about eternity. Every moment mattered. Every choice led somewhere. And the love of Jesus was real, waiting for those who would seek him. As she looked at herself in the mirror, at the scars that now marked her body, she realized something profound. She had been given a second chance. And she would not waste it. This was her testimony. A moment that changed everything. Grace stood in stunned silence, her soul trembling as Jesus' words echoed through her very being. The revelation she had just received was unlike anything she had ever imagined. Black people had been chosen. Their history was not just one of struggle, but of divine purpose, a destiny so great that even the forces of darkness had worked tirelessly to make them forget who they truly were. As she gazed upon them in the spiritual realm, she saw their true form, not as the world had labeled them, but as warriors of light, clothed in radiant garments of glory. They stood tall, their very presence pulsating with divine energy. Some carried swords of fire, others held scrolls filled with ancient wisdom. She saw elders surrounded by golden flames, their prayers shaping the fabric of reality itself. The battle unseen. Then, in an instant, the scene shifted again. Grace saw the enemy, dark forces lurking in the shadows, whispering lies into the minds of people. She saw how history had been manipulated, how identities had been stripped away, how truth had been buried beneath layers of deception. She saw spirits of confusion, division, and fear working tirelessly to keep God's chosen people from rising into their full power. She gasped as she saw chains, not physical, but spiritual, wrapped around entire generations. Chains of self-doubt, shame, and forgotten heritage. She saw how the world had tried to erase their connection to the divine, replacing it with narratives of inferiority. But then, something miraculous happened. She saw some breaking free, through faith, through revelation, through prayer. When they remembered who they were, the chains shattered like glass. Their prayers were like earthquakes in the spirit realm, shaking the foundations of darkness. Every time one of them spoke the truth, reclaimed their identity, or lifted their voice in worship, the forces of the enemy recoiled in fear. Jesus looked at Grace with a solemn expression. The time is coming when they will remember. The time is coming when they will rise. The forgotten prophecy. As Jesus extended his hand, Grace saw something even more astonishing, a lost prophecy hidden in the depths of time. She saw ancient scrolls, scriptures that had been misunderstood, misinterpreted, or deliberately concealed. She saw a vision of Moses standing before the Israelites, speaking of a people who would endure great suffering, but who would ultimately be restored by God himself. She saw verses in the Bible that had been overlooked, promises made to a people scattered across the earth, but never forgotten by their Creator. And then she saw the future, a generation awakening to their divine calling. She saw leaders, teachers, prophets, and warriors rising up in every nation, no longer believing the lies they had been told. They carried a light so bright that the darkness had no choice but to retreat. Jesus turned to her once more. They have always been mine. But they must awaken. And you must help them see. The mission given. Grace felt an overwhelming weight settle upon her shoulders. The revelation she had just received was too great to keep to herself. She had been given a mission, not just to return to the world of the living, but to be a voice for truth. But how, she whispered. How can I make them see? Jesus' expression softened, and he placed his hand over her heart. Instantly, she felt something ignite within her, like fire burning in her very soul. Speak the truth, and I will do the rest. At that moment, she felt herself being pulled backward. The light around her began to fade. The spiritual realm blurred into a whirlwind of motion, and she felt herself being drawn back to her body. Pain shot through her chest as air filled her lungs once more. The harsh sounds of the physical world rushed back, the beeping of hospital monitors, the voices of doctors, the touch of nurses trying to revive her. She was back. But she was not the same. A call to the world. Days passed, but the vision never left her mind. The images were burned into her soul, the glowing warriors, the chains breaking, the forgotten prophecy. She knew what she had to do. She had to tell the world who they really were. She had to remind them of the divine power they carried. She had to help them awaken. This was no longer just her story. It was a message for an entire people. A revelation that could change everything. And she would not stop until it was heard. Grace gasped as her lungs filled with air, her body jolting back to life. The hospital room was dimly lit, the rhythmic beeping of monitors the only sound breaking the silence. A nurse rushed to her side, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're awake," the nurse whispered, pressing the call button for the doctors. But Grace barely heard her. She had returned, but she was not the same. The vision was still burning in her mind. She could feel the weight of the message pressing upon her soul. She had seen the truth, and now she had to share it. As she lay in the hospital bed, memories of her journey flooded back, the spiritual war, the chains of deception, the divine calling placed upon black people, and Jesus' urgent words. They must awaken. They must remember who they are. A world still in chains. Days passed, and as Grace recovered, she began to see the hidden war playing out around her. The forces she had witnessed in the spiritual realm were at work in the physical world. She turned on the news and saw the same cycle she had been shown: division, conflict, fear being sown among people. She saw young black men being labeled as threats, black women carrying burdens they were never meant to bear, entire communities fighting against forces designed to keep them down. But she also saw something else. She saw faith that refused to die. She saw churches filled with people still crying out to God. She saw young children being taught to pray, elders who had never let go of the promises spoken over their ancestors. She saw communities surviving against impossible odds, not just surviving, but enduring, thriving, fighting back with faith. And suddenly, she understood. The power of identity. This was why the enemy had worked so hard to suppress the truth. Because if black people remembered who they were, they would be unstoppable. If they understood that they were more than their struggles, more than what history had painted them to be. If they reclaimed their divine inheritance. If they stepped into the spiritual power Jesus had shown her. The world itself would shift. This was why the chains had been placed on them for centuries. This was why history had been rewritten, why cultures had been stripped away, why their connection to God had been questioned. Because the moment they awakened, the enemy would lose. The vision of the future. One night, as she sat in quiet prayer, Grace was given another vision, one of hope. She saw black people rising, not just in power, but in spiritual authority. She saw young leaders stepping into their calling, their voices no longer silenced. She saw elders passing down wisdom, unafraid to speak the truths that had once been hidden. She saw churches filled not just with worship, but with revelation. And she saw something even greater. She saw healing. Communities healing from the wounds of the past. Families being restored. Marriages strengthened. Children growing up knowing who they were in God, not questioning their worth, but standing boldly in their divine identity. And she saw a great movement of faith, sweeping across the world. A revival led by the very people the world had tried to break. The forgotten ones. The ones who had carried the weight of suffering but never let go of their faith. The ones Jesus himself had called chosen. The call to action. Grace knew now that she couldn't stay silent. This message wasn't just for her, it was for the world. It was for those who had been searching for answers. For those who had felt lost, unworthy, forgotten. For those who had been told they were weak when, in truth, they carried unimaginable strength. She had to speak. She had to share the vision. Because the time was short. The door was open. And the question remained. Would they walk through it? Grace could no longer ignore the fire burning inside her. The message she had received was too urgent, too powerful to keep to herself. She had been chosen to witness the truth, but witnessing wasn't enough, she had to act. She knew the world would resist. She knew some would call her a liar, a dreamer, or worse, but that didn't matter. The truth was the truth, whether people accepted it or not. She had seen the chains. She had seen the deception. She had seen the forces trying to silence an entire people. But she had also seen the light. She had seen the warriors. She had seen the power that could no longer be contained. Breaking the silence. She started small, first, with her family. She told them about her experience, about what Jesus had revealed to her. Some listened with wide eyes, others with skepticism. Then she spoke to her church. Then to her community. Then to the world. The message spread like wildfire. It resonated with those who had always felt something deeper within them, but had never had the words to describe it. It awakened something ancient. Something powerful. Black people across the world began to see themselves differently. They started questioning the narratives they had been given. They started recognizing their spiritual authority. They started walking in their true identity. And the enemy trembled. A war of identity. The moment the awakening began, so did the resistance. The media mocked those who spoke of spiritual truths. The governments labeled the movement as dangerous. The churches, even some that claimed to follow Jesus, refused to acknowledge the truth. Because the world had been built on the lie that black people were meant to remain powerless. And now, that lie was falling apart. Grace saw the battle intensify. She saw how the enemy used distraction, division, and doubt to keep people from stepping into their purpose. But she also saw warriors rising. She saw young black men and women speaking boldly about their faith. She saw families reclaiming their heritage, teaching their children who they really were. She saw entire communities coming together, praying with a power that shook the heavens. And then, she saw something even greater. The return of the lost ones. Jesus had shown her a prophecy, one that had been forgotten. A prophecy of a people who had been scattered across the earth but would one day return to their rightful place. She saw people from the Americas, Africa, Europe, and the islands, all recognizing the same truth. They were the descendants of a chosen people. They had been broken, but not destroyed. They had been lost, but now they were being found. And just as it had been prophesied, they were coming back together. It was more than a revival. It was a restoration. The final warning. Grace knew that time was running out. She could feel it in her spirit. The vision had not just been a message of hope, it was also a warning. Jesus had told her, "The door is open, but it will not stay open forever." This was the time to choose. Would black people continue to live under false identities? Would they keep accepting the labels given to them by the world? Would they remain blind to their divine calling? Or would they rise? Would they reclaim what had always been theirs? Would they step into the power that the enemy had tried so hard to suppress? Would they finally awaken? Grace's voice now echoed across nations, across generations, across history itself. The awakening had begun. But the question remained. Would you answer the call before the door closed? The time is short. The choice is yours.